Hey y'all. So my husband asked me to replicate a recipe that he saw a video of. It was this chicken fajita pasta, and I take it as a compliment when he thinks I can replicate something that he sees, but of course I had to put my own twist on it. So let's get into it. First, I'm going to trim and slice my washed chicken breast. I washed it in vinegar and limes, and as you see here, I'm trimming off the extra fat. I then slice the chicken in half and then cut it up into smaller pieces. After that, I need to go ahead and season it. I'm going to use the garlic powder, minced garlic, black pepper, seasoning salt, paprika, and a packet of carne asada seasoning. The recipe called for a fajita seasoning packet, but I didn't have that, so I figured this was close to it. It's like a taco seasoning. After I season the chicken, I'm going to let that sit to the side so that the flavors can set. And then after that, I need to go ahead and cut up my sausages. Since I don't eat red meat, I'm using a turkey smoked sausage for myself. And then for my husband and the kids, I'm going to use some beef smoked sausage. And then I saw that he had an Italian sausage left in the refrigerator, so I figured I'd go ahead and add that so that it doesn't go bad. After slicing the sausages, I set those to the side. Now I'm going to go ahead and slice up my vegetables. It wouldn't be a fajita pasta without those stoplight bell peppers and onion. And since I think that green onion goes with almost every savory dish, I'm adding a few of those, and I'll save some for the garnish. Once I have all of the main ingredients prepped, it's time to go over to the stove. I'm using this rainbow spiral rotini because that's what I had in my cabinet, although I think the recipe just used a basic regular rotini pasta. And of course, you want to go ahead and salt your water really well and let that come to a boil. While that's boiling, I'm going to go ahead and start browning up my sausages. I'm doing them in separate skillets since I don't eat the beef and pork sausage, but the sauce itself is going to include only the poultry-based products, and when I fix my husband's plate, I'm going to add his sausage on top. When I add sausage to a pasta dish like this, I like to get a good sear on the sausages. It brings out the flavor to me, and I just think it looks better to have some of that caramelization on it. Once those sausages are done, I remove them from the pan and I'm going to go ahead and set those to the side. Next, in that same pan that I cooked the turkey sausages in, I'm going to go ahead and sear up the chicken. I'm going to cook the chicken until it's mostly done, but not all the way done, because once you add it to that sauce, it's going to cook a little bit more. And I personally think that chicken can still be dry even if you're going to add it to a sauce. After the chicken is cooked, I take that out and then I set that to the side. It's now time for me to go ahead and cook down my vegetables. Some of you might feel like I should have cooked the vegetables in a separate pan and just sauteed them in some regular oil prior to even doing the meats, but I like to build upon my flavors, and cooking the vegetables in the same oil or pan that the other things were cooked in adds more flavor to them, and then I don't also have to add too much seasoning to the vegetables because I want every component to be flavored. To me, when making dishes with multiple components, you want all those flavors to marry together, and this is just one way to make sure that happens. But, of course, I then also listen to my ancestors while I cook, and something was telling me to add a little something else to the vegetables, so I grabbed some red pepper flakes and added that to them. Once I got my vegetables cooked down to a toothsome texture, I removed them and set them to the side. To me, toothsome means that they're soft but not mushy. I like them to have a slight crunch, but they definitely aren't raw. Now it's time for me to build my sauce. When I make a sauce from scratch, I like to build it without the other ingredients so that I can make sure the sauce flavor is right before I add the other stuff in. The flavor of the sauce shouldn't be dependent upon the vegetables and meats that you add in. The sauce itself should have a really good flavor. In that same pan that I cook everything else, I am adding chicken broth, minced garlic, some heavy whipping cream. And as you can see here, I don't measure anything. I just call on my granny to tell me when to stop. And then before I added the Parmesan cheese, I give it a little taste just to make sure that the flavors are coming along. After adding the cheese and letting it cook a little bit, it's time to start adding back my vegetables, the chicken and the sausages. I'm going to let that cook a little bit, and as you can see, it's still a little bit of runny. I know that it's runny. I could have thickened it prior to adding the other ingredients, but I prefer to do it this way because it gives me a little better idea of how much I want to thicken it. To thicken the sauce, I'm making a slurry with cornstarch. You want to make a slurry so that you don't have lumps in your sauce. You could also use flour as a thickener, but I prefer to use cornstarch when I'm making a sauce, but then when I make a gravy or a roux, I often use flour. I'm making my slurry with the chicken broth and cream instead of just water so that it doesn't change the flavor of my sauce. When I'm trying to thicken a sauce, I like to do it nice and slow. If I jump out too fast and add too much of the thickener and then it gets too thick, I then have to go back and add more liquid to the overall pan, and it could affect the flavors that I've already established. I felt like it needed to have a little bit more volume, so I added a bit more chicken broth, and that meant I also had to add a little more slurry. As you can see here, I'm mixing it around and letting it cook more so that I can gauge the thickness. After a bit of boiling and stirring and tasting and adding a bit more cornstarch, I got it to the thickness that I prefer. I also know this is going to set up a bit more after a while. This is actually dinner for my family, but I was cooking it way earlier in the day, and by the time that they come to eat, I know it's going to thicken up a little more. So as that sauce cooked down a bit more, I decided to shred up some pepper jack cheese, and because I just felt like that would make a good garnish along with those green onions. And so now it's time to go ahead and plate everything up. Now, if I wasn't cooking dinner at lunchtime and it was ready to eat right away, I would have mixed the noodles in the sauce, but I didn't want the noodles to be too soft by the time everyone else ate. I wanted them to still be a little bit al dente, so I kept them separate. That way I could keep the sauce warm but not keep the noodles cooking. And like I said, this sauce is still a little thin right now, but by the time the rest of my family eats, it will be thicker. So here's how my serving looks, but I think the portion that I made for my husband with the added sausage on top looks so much better. Thanks for watching. Enjoy.